Labor in the Senate will oppose $18 billion worth of savings the government has suggested in this budget. Also, for the first time, I think Chris Bowen there gave the strongest indication yet that Labor will allow the debt levy passage through the Senate. In terms of Labor's own suggestions for budget savings, well, there wasn't a lot of detail there, but Chris Bowen did say that Labor wanted to look further into tax reform and suggested an entrepreneur visa to try and encourage high-tech start-up companies like in the Silicon Valley. Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Agenda. Let's get the reaction now from the backbench. Liberal MP Peter Hendy joins me from Canberra, and from Brisbane, Labor MP Graham Perrott. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. Peter Hendy, first to you. It is now clear that Labor will block some of the government's key measures. What's your plan B?
Well, at this stage we're going to proceed with the budget as is. Labor are blocking, look, I know Chris Bowen was saying 18 billion, it's 40 billion. The details there, the Treasurer put it out last week. In fact, I think it's actually just gone up to 52 because I heard Chris Bowen say at the press club that they're committed to the 0.5% of GNI for foreign aid. That's another 12 billion that Labor hasn't said before. So they've got a lot of issues to deal with, but the fact is that we'll be talking to the Senate, we'll be talking to the crossbenchers, and our plan is to get the budget through.
Graham Perrott, Chris Bowen there offered little in the way of savings that Labor would put forward. One issue that's raised time and time again is superannuation. Do you think that's something that both sides of politics needs to address?
Well, I agree with what Chris said, that superannuation is about long-term decisions for the future. You make a decision when you're 21 about what you might be doing when you're 71. So I agree with him that we should remove those superannuation tweakings from the budget process, and I think even Peter Hendy would agree with that. I think that question from Mr. Keane in there went to the heart of the matter. There are some significant foregone budget savings there that I think should be revisited, as Mr. Bowen indicated. The Australian superannuation industry, that broad-scale superannuation introduced by Hawke and Keating has been a great success story around the world, but some people are doing some things that are worth a second look, that's for sure.
Graham Perrott, just on the debt levy, will Labor support it? It seems you will.
Well, as we just heard, obviously it's a broken promise for Mr Abbott and Mr Hendy, something for them to take to their constituents, but it sounds like we won't be getting in the way of that budget saving measure.
And Peter Hendy, it seems there has been a visceral response to some aspects of this budget. We've seen protests today from university students, and it has stopped Tony Abbott from a visit to Geelong. Are you concerned about the reaction to this budget, and what's been the reaction in your electorate?
First part on the university visit issue, the Socialist Alternative group that's been running these mini riots, if you want to call them something, they're intolerant, they're undemocratic, and they should be pinned for what they are. So these people aren't. They need to tone it down. They've got a right to protest, but they need to stop that sort of outrageous jostling that occurred with Julie Bishop and Sophie Mirabella in the last week is just not acceptable. With respect to my electorate, well, I've got a focus group, and it's my electorate of Eden Monaro. I've been out and about since the budget. Can I say, as you would expect, a lot of people don't like a lot of the things that are in the budget, but can I say overwhelmingly, if I'm in Queanbeyan or Cooma or other parts of my electorate, I have overwhelmingly received the feedback that they understand something had to be done to get the budget under control. Now, you might think I'm just spouting rhetoric here, but that's actually on the ground reaction I'm getting in my electorate.
Okay. Now, just on the student issue as well, Graham Perrott, do you surely condemn what we did see surrounding Sophie Mirabella and also Julie Bishop? And isn't it pretty sad that the Prime Minister of this country has to cancel a visit because of safety concerns?
Well, the Prime Minister takes advice from his security detail, and obviously he should respect that advice. But let's get things straight. University students care about things, and like most Australians, when they're lied to, they get upset. So they will voice their concerns. I'm sure that those concerns will come out more and more over the next couple of months. But obviously, we should never stop anyone from speaking at a university, be they an academic that you agree with or disagree with. And obviously, we should have respect for our officers like the Foreign Minister or the Prime Minister or whoever. But can I come back to something Peter just said? Peter, you won by 500 votes. I think at the last election. You've got 19,000 pensioners. You told them you wouldn't cut their pensions, and you're saying they're not upset at all. I'm sure your street stalls must be a bit different to the ones that I'm experiencing, because we had a very, very concerned group of pensioners approach street stalls on the weekend and telephone my office and email my office. Different planets, obviously.
Okay, there has been a pretty strong reaction to something else today. Perhaps this is a bit of a water cooler story and perhaps not the mainstream, but Tony Abbott continuing his budget blitz, and this morning on Melbourne radio gave a wink to the host John Fain as a caller called in expressing her concern. This is how it all unfolded this morning.
I'm a 67-year-old pensioner. 3 chronic incurable medical conditions, 2 life-threatening. I just survive on around $400 a fortnight after I pay my rent. And I work on an adult sex line to make ends meet. Now, that's the only way I can do it. I've worked out, and my maths isn't crash hot, that it's going to cost me at least an extra $850 a year with the increases in medical visits and medication. I'm on a number of different medications that may probably increase as my conditions deteriorate. What do you suggest I cut out, Mr. Abbott?
Peter Hendy, as Gloria, the 67-year-old pensioner, explained that she worked for an adult sex line, Tony Abbott gave a wink and a smile to John Fain, the host. Now, Sarah Hanson-Young, for one, has described Tony Abbott as a grub. Feminists on Twitter have called him a creep. I just want to gauge your reaction to this. Is the reaction online overkill?
Look, the verbal abuse from the left on virtually anything that mainstream people do is look, I didn't actually see that. I was watching down the camera, but as you've asked me to, but the point is this, is that people react because they're hearing a scare campaign from Labor. We're not actually cutting the budget. Cutting the age pension. Labor are going around saying that, but it's not actually happening. Are you concerned, though, Peter Hendy,
about the opinion polls, and in particular the polls showing that women are moving even further away from Tony Abbott?
I think the opinion polls are, can I say, I've got an analogy at the moment. I've told you what the on-the-ground reaction in my electorate is. I know what Graham just said, but in my electorate, which is one of the most marginal seats in the country, that's right. And the fact is that in my electorate, people are reacting to the budget, but they understand on the other side what's needed to be done about getting the budget under control.
Peter Hendy.
But I'd like to make this point, is that before the election, 8-9 weeks before the election, the other side changed the Prime Minister. They went from Julia Gillard to Kevin Rudd. They went up in the polls.
All right, Peter Hendy, sorry, we are going to have to leave it there. We are right out of time today. I'm sorry for the truncated version of Lunchtime Agenda, and Graham Perrett, we'll have to get your reaction to that wink another time. Thanks for joining us. The news is next.